Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to do a little introduction. This is the first public iteration of the Emerging Scholars and Practitioners Committee Spotlight Series, which is coming out of the Thinking Through the Museum Research Network. And this event series is a result of a grant program that was developed and run by the Emerging Scholars and Practitioners Committee to support its members. And so featured presenters are recipients of the ESPC Emerging Projects Grant, and these events provide a platform for them to share their research with and get feedback from the broader Thinking Through the Museum community. And so in just a minute, once I'm done my intro, I'll put some information about Thinking Through the Museum in the chat, as well as a link to our newsletter. So if you'd like to stay in the loop for future events, you can do that. And today I'm pleased to welcome the curatorial duo Mending the Museum, which is composed of artist Camila Salcedo and researcher and as well as TTTM affiliate Karina Roman Justo. And they are both emerging Latinx curators based in Canada with an interest in museum practices and pedagogical approaches in art spaces. Together, their intent is to work as a bridge between artists, communities, regional museums, and craft objects from their collections to reflect on ancestry and speculative futures within the framework of cultural belonging. And so I'm going to also put a little bit of information about Mending the Museum in the chat in just a second. But without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Karina and Camila, and you can begin your presentation. It's great to have you both here today.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining. I think we're just gonna start with presenting this project that came out from another project in a way. We had a research trip to Peru and Bolivia last December. And that is where we kind of fell in love with double chamber whistling bottles from the Andes. And that's why we got this first contact. And it was thanks to an artist there that is trying to revive and make replicas of these bottles that you will be seeing in the presentation. And we, after that trip and that experience of making a little bit of the bottles and understanding more about them, but not a lot. We were curious to know where we could find more of these bottles, if there were any actually of these bottles in Canadian collections, in Canadian museums. And that is how this other small project kind of came through, because we did find some of these double chamber bottles in museums, and we found out that the Rome actually had a few of them. So that is how we decided to do this project first with the rum. And we can probably go to our next slide to show you which were the bottles that initiated the conversation with the rum. We found that they had 3 bottles from the Chimo culture from Peru. So the Chimo culture was located in the coast of Peru, kind of like central and northern coast of Peru. And you can see some more information there in the slides. But we found that that was kind of a curious thing that we could find like these bottles in Canadian collections. And we've seen them also in the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal. They have similar bottles as well. But we decided to reach out then to the ROM and find out more about the bottles. And that is how the conversation started in June. We reached out to Justin Jenny, who is the senior curator of the American Archaeology Collection. So it's collection from the Americas. It is quite a wide, large collection that mixes everything from the Americas and indigenous cultures of America. So we reached out to Justin. It was not the first time I was reaching out to Justin. I had done other research for my thesis to see other items in the museum. So it was kind of nice to reach out to someone I had already had contact with within the museum, and also through the affiliation and a partnership with the general project of Thinking to the Museum. So from that, I guess that we did find out Justin was very open to that, and we also like find out that Justin was like, well, these are not the only boulders we have. We have more information. Would you like to have that? And we'll go back probably to that later too. But that is how the conversation started. We decided to, after talking with one, having a conversation with one appreciated member from the Thinking Through the Museum project with with Shirley Butler, of like how do I reach to the museum first, like back again and first visiting and looking at specific items in specific collections. Even though I had done that for my thesis research, I was still a little bit hesitant because we wanted to do a little bit more with the bottles than just like probably look at them, but in the future to think about having a more close-up observation and getting the bottles to zone. How do you start that conversation without scaring the museum? And one of the options that or idea that we conversated with Shelley is like, well, you're also like very pedagogical. Instead of doing that, wouldn't it be nice to make it a community visit? And I was so happy that she mentioned that because we had the mini grant from the ESPC. There was a possibility like for us to actually carry through such a plan, but also because with Camila we're always talking, right, about how to expand our access. Like for us, it's very important to think about how our bodies have, first of all, landed in this side of the continent and how that allows for bridges and communications with South America, but also that we were here and then we are having access to these spaces as museums that can be a little bit, mysterious for other folks that are not in academia, that are not in museum, working in museums. So we thought that would be great. Who should we reach out? We have done a project before with diasporic artists, so we thought maybe this time we could do it beyond our like artistic circle, and that is how the idea kind of came to be. And when we reached out to Justin, we kind of proposed that, and the museum was very open to have that possibility. So I don't know, Cami, you want to add something in that what happened in that first stage of the project?
That all sounds right. We can keep going.
Okay, so then in August also, where we were talking with other people and trying to make this a meaningful experience, because we thought, well, it's not just us as researchers, as curators going into a collection. Um, how can we make this better? And then we have heard about Dr. Kara Kroptotish, and we reached out to Kara. We were planning actually to even we thought maybe she could help us direct. But at the end, things worked out in a way that we could have her as a consultant. So Cara was very generous. She had very wide experience working with museums, and I had read her book, like This Is Our Life, where she kind of like lays out these logistics and plans of how you bring, especially communities of origin, into collections. And she was working with people from Haida people and in the UK. So this was also kind of like this very wide project that really had an impact into how I also saw this access to collections and how important was it to bring different people. So we thought that Kara could give us some insights and things that maybe we weren't thinking in our other previous projects. We had a great conversation with her and we had like so many takeaways. We have just listed a few here. But in those of you that are interested in bringing different communities, in this case, we weren't bringing necessarily a community of like, the makers that know how to do it, but we decided to bring members from the Andean diaspora. And we also had a certain amount of people that we could bring in because the security measurements of the museum. And also we were thinking, how do we approach these people? Do we invite them? How do we do this? So then we decided first to talk with Cara. What was the best way to also, get people to be interested into coming. So we were really keen into listening to her own experiences and points that really I think help at the end. We could see the results in the final visit. But some of those takeaways were like preparing the group with instructions for a pleasant experience and what to anticipate. So it's always important to make clear the expectations, but also learn from the expectations of the group, but kind of having them prepare of like what they're going to see, what is kind of like going to happen, and also get information from the museum about visit protocol. So then like what stuff can happen. So then preparing them before that or giving certain basis of instructions, and also during the visit, of course, all of these instructions have to be repeated. So then it's kind of like how do you guide and then people feel comfortable in knowing what they cannot do. Also, one thing that was important we haven't considered before was like maybe asking someone in the group to take notes and having someone taking the pictures, because it is true, once you are in a visit and you get so into it, people get so into it that sometimes you are just talking, you're exchanging, you're looking at the selected items, and then it is nice to have someone that is taking notes, that it is taking the pictures. So we had anticipated and planned for that as well. So then there are like these distributed tasks among the group. Then other things were ask how, also like ask how observation and possible handle of objects will happen. And this was a key point too, because we wanted to know what could happen, what we could do for the items, because here comes what the museum staff also expects. Kind of like those anxieties the museum may have about certain objects. So we wanted to know is like what is it that we can do? How is people going to be able to observe? What can you show as well? And in that aspect, having those questions were in terms to make the museum also feel that we wanted to create a dialogue, but also letting them know, we are here to visit. We want this space to be very transparent about what like you have, how you function. So we're gonna make these questions too, and to have that sort of like how Camila and I work is that as curators, we want to be a buffer. So between the questions people may have that may be complicated and also what the museum wants, or, depends also on the staff of the museum. And I think that later we'll mention we were very lucky to have a very specific facilitator for this experience. But we understand that there is like these different anxieties coming from both groups that can at some point you only can see them, or they can kind of like pop up while you're in the interactions. Um, so having these previous things of like what we were allowed and taking like that side of the museum too, of like what can you really offer us, was a key mention of Kara. Then one thing that we really tried to do was we were really hoping to have a very diverse groups in terms of age. Kara mentioned how important it was to have people from the community, but from different ages, coming and looking, because the interactions, the experience, the questions can be very enriching, but also because that creates a sense of cohesiveness in the group, like intergenerational knowledge. So in our call later, we put that it was open to any ages, basically. Then engaging with the history or provide a better idea of the context of the bottles. We were hoping that this would be something the museum could do, but then later we'll explain more about that. How did it go? And then another thing to consider was having a moment to debrief after the visit. Kara was very adamant into it's always good to unpack what people have seen, because a lot of people they don't expect to feel or see certain things in the museum space, especially for first newcomers into these experiences. And also we had to consider the physical needs of the attendees. So we were, if someone in your audience, I don't know, your group it needs a smoke break or it's time for a snack. So we were able to ask the museum, can we have a break and have people have snacks? And also that became a very interesting moment for the visit. And also this is something that we are still working on, which is like after the whole thing happens, how are we planning to maintain the connection with the group in the future, right? Especially when it's something we cannot anticipate because we were just going to meet many of these people that very same day of the visit. So we were already in August trying to figure out all these logistics. I guess we can go to the next phase of the, or you want to explain something
Yeah,
else?
one other thing that came up as well was the idea of bringing artists to the visit as well, who could be ceramicists that might have not necessarily like the historical understanding, but a material understanding of how something can be constructed. And that was a really nice observation because I think within our group, that's something that we often have as well, Karina being a historian, myself being an artist. We like bringing in these different perspectives. So that was something else that Cara had brought up. But yeah, we can keep going.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that was a very key
So
point. Go ahead.
for our outreach, we did it over a 2-month period. This is the poster that we created and we shared on social media. Our Instagram post reached 93 likes and 35 shares. We also created a list of different community groups we wanted to reach out to. So we did direct outreach via email to these groups, some of them which we had connections previously already, like Casa Maíz, Sud Gallery, Alucine, and the La Mas conference, and Creato, as well as 3 new groups we had not had previous connection to, but felt that they might be interested as well. So Aculpeca, Casa Peruana, and Casa Cultural Ecuatoriana. In the end, through these 2 outreach methods, we gathered interest from 15 people. And we did also directly reach out to one artist, David Constantino Salazar, who we felt could really benefit from the visit as well. In the end, we invited 10 people plus the 2 of us to attend. However, the day of the visit, 3 people were unable to make it. So in the end, there were 9 of us, 1 youth, and then everyone else was in the range between 29 and 55 years of age. As well, the visit in the end was on a Tuesday, so I think having youth was a little bit perhaps difficult if they were in school, but thankfully the youth that did come was homeschooled, so it was a great opportunity that actually the visit was school for him that day. And of the 9 people, 8 were of the Andean diaspora, and 1 was a Latin American artist. Do you want me to keep going, Cuddy?
Okay. So then on October, we were trying to first confirm all the folks that were going to participate. It is also sometimes it's interesting to see how hard is it to get, like, we got a lot of excitement and some people interested, but also to get the group you want, because some of the requests were in for groups and we were giving the priority to and the diaspora members. So that was also for us a challenge to how do we reach out beyond the people that we already know. So then in October, basically preparations continue. It was just like communicating with the museum. And then at some point we found out that Justin Jennings wasn't going to be able because he was actually going to be in Peru in a conference. So then we got assigned April Elkins, who is a facilitator in the museum and who we kept the most direct contact and did like all of the logistics and coordinations, like filling up forms for people. And providing more insights and details about the group we were bringing about. Then also, Justin has sent out a list of like, oh, you might be interested in other items. We have more than you can see in the website. And for us, we were kind of expecting that, but I guess we always get a little bit like impressed and shocked when we realize how many items are not listed in their public, and we know it is in their public database, and we acknowledge that this takes labor, this takes time, and museum stuff, but there were so many other items. There were other bottles that were in there, so we were able to select 10 items, and the list was really long of the things we saw. It was a really long list. Uh, so trying to select just a few from that was kind of hard, but when we went for we wanted to talk a little bit about like duality in Andean cosmology and kind of have like a sort of visual reference to also make it more located for visitors to focus on certain things or invite them to kind of focus into those. So our selection was done, and we also needed to confirm. And after that, I guess it was just starting to send in the information, like bring comfortable clothes. We're going to be standing. Let us know if you have, any accessibility issue or, matter that we really have to consider or accommodation. And also giving them like little kind of like you know, just the general museum visiting protocols. Like if you want to write something and take notes, please bring your notebooks, but make it with pencil. That kind of stuff that people, for us can be like common sense, but you have to prepare your group so then they are very comfortable in just being themselves in the space. So I think we can pass to the next. Oh, and also we have anticipating getting, all the snacks, and we plan also for our visitors to give them passes to get to the museum. So we were going to give them back what they spent basically in coming to the museum and taking the time to come, and give them back like transit passes as well. So that is also in terms of accessibility, because we know that, you're investing. We don't know the economical situation of everyone or how easy access it is for them to go to the museum. And we really appreciated that they took the time for coming to the visit.
Yeah, it also was a bit of a challenge in preparing folks for the visit to get them to fill out the forms. So in order to like bridge that access point, we just asked April if we could print them and have them fill them out on that day. So that ended up being totally fine. But something that we kind of didn't anticipate and found like a solution around. We already mentioned a little bit about this, but yeah, the day of the visit, we had 3 participants cancel, which was okay in the end. These things happen. We met outside of the museum entrance 15 minutes before we were to meet with April. We entered the museum through the staff entrance, and April guided us first to the staff conference room. So, but before we actually went into the vaults, we wanted to have a chat. So initially, we all introduced ourselves, spoke about our background, both like our identity and kind of our careers or what interests folks kind of came into the visit with. And April also outlined what to expect when we enter the room in a very like considerate way. One of the most shocking things that to me that she brought up was that there's more than 400,000 objects in there. And I think hearing that number was quite jarring, especially before entering that room, kind of not realizing the vastness of it, I think.
Yeah, so that initial moment, I guess, was quite nice for us. First, because we asked folks, "Why are you here? What got your interest into coming into the museum and doing this visit?" And we got different answers. One person was, "Well, my wife saw it, and so and she knows I'm Peruvian, so she told me about it and asked if I was interested in going. I thought I could come with my sons." He ended up going just with one, but there was like this interest, and he was like, "Yes, I was curious." And also, this person identified as indigenous. He didn't mention exactly like any specific group, but he had that like connection to Cusco, specifically in Peru. So that was one person that joined. And then someone else, we have a Peruvian Salvadorian who had experiences seeing and viewing these similar types of models in El Salvador, and kind of thought this as a kind of a very curious coincidence that she had had that experience not too long ago, and then wanted to expand and explore more that side of her heritage and her family's background. So then she was very curious about that, because she had had a very moving experience with this in El Salvador. So we thought that was interesting as well. Then someone else had mentioned that it was just like at this point, after migrating certain amount of years, you just want to connect with anything, Andean, Peruvian, Latin American, which was also very, a very, very personal perspective into, it's like anything, just like give me something, I need this connection. Um, and then other people that were also just like, curious into what they have read about. So they were curious just like to come into the museum and see the bottles. And one of them was also, he was a print artist, but his parents actually had a shop in Piura in Peru that made ceramics. So he was also curious about learning about these other types of ceramics because he already had like that personal connection to them. So it was like this different kind of interest, I guess, but also having the space like to share and seeing other faces. And then we started at some point also sharing a little bit more about our migration stories, like how we end up here. But after that, like settling, like, okay, these are the interests, this is what people are here, and this is what is motivating them, then we kind of like were able to, I guess it was a moment to open up a little bit because what was shared was like said very simply, but also it felt personal. So then after that, I guess the group felt a little bit more at ease with each other. And then we were able like to leave the room and actually go into like this storage space.
So
So
in the room, once we entered, April told us a little bit more about the space and kind of protocols, a little bit. To be honest, I felt that she was a lot more flexible than I had initially anticipated, with Karina and I having done visits in the past before. Sometimes they're very precious about like, don't touch anything, kind of like, um, but she was very open. To us like standing quite close to the work. And we also so first we got a tour of the space. We also saw that there was a kind of a back storage area where um, there was like a couple of desks where they do like inventory and take photos of the objects. So she also shared if anyone had an emotional moment or needed to step away for a second, that was like a safe, quiet space for people to go, which we really appreciated that option. And then afterwards, she showed us where specifically the Latin American collection was. So we got to see some other objects. And then finally, we came back to a table where all the objects were laid out, like you can see here on paper. And from there, we saw the 10 pre-selected objects. Karina and I tried to select kind of a range. We wanted them like all to be either chamber bottles, whistling bottles, different types. And also we selected a variety of like some had cracks in them, some were more broken than others, different types of clay colors, just a wide array that can kind of give us more insight into like how they're constructed and the differences between them as well. And then during the visit, we discussed some general themes like materiality, firing processes, this concept of doubling and duality in the bottles, um, different collecting practices, including falsification of objects. Some of the visitors were like really interested in knowing how old they are, how they came to be part of the collection, um, other conservation questions around cracks and how those are handled, um, what the process would be for repatriation of objects, which was an interesting conversation because the ROM does repatriate objects, but there is, of course, like a whole protocol around kind of who can claim ownership and what that looks like. But April said that they honor kind of any request they have to consider. Um, and one other thing that Karina had already mentioned is the fact that through this community visit, actually kind of forces the museum staff to take documentation of the object. So had we not requested this visit, those 100 plus objects that we had to choose from would not then become part of their website. So community visits like this are encouraged because it kind of bumps that priority to their list of having the opportunity to document those for public viewing, which was really great.
Yes, I guess that to me that was like, oh, we by being interested in these objects, like this probably very like personal from research, like we just took interest in these items, but suddenly we realized that just by asking for them and having people come into that became, April explained it, said this is great because this is the opportunity we have to take these items, take pictures of them, and then, check how they are. So it's like helping the museum in a way to remember these objects exist in their collection. Felt a little bit, and I guess that people suddenly felt their presence was important because of that. Like because they also had got this interest and the museum was putting the effort into. And along like all of these conversations, we were having different inputs also from people. For us, this experience was very interesting too, because since April is a facilitator and she's not an expert in the collection, I think that set a different tone for our visit. And that was because people would have like technical questions or questions about the history, but April said like, I'm not the expert, Justin is the expert. And then later you can reach out to him with all of these questions you have. I'm not going to be able to ask, but that for us really really gave us the opportunity to have people speaking about what they thought, what questions they have, and sharing experiences. So, in one of these terms, like, what do you know? Where have you seen this before? Became more of the conversation, like putting together pieces of knowledge and different levels, maybe not academic knowledge, but what have you seen these bottles before? What do you know about the material and ceramics? So then, we have someone as David, who is an artist, so he was focusing more into the aspects of like the clay, how does it work, and explaining people how would you get that tone of color too. Then we had another participant who had seen the bottles, different bottles from another culture in El Salvador, and had been able to hear them. So then she was explaining about these other aspects and sharing how these other bottles had birds. So then we started talking about the different possibilities, how these are made, and then bringing the research that Camila and I had done previously on the bottles to share a bit more about, like duality, what sounds mean in different Andean cosmologies, and kind of like to share that. So it really felt like knowledge sharing, like putting these beats, knowing that none of us were really like experts in that sense. And it was nice that April mentioned that she was like, well, here, we're here to listen to you as well. So I think that made very like people started feeling very comfortable in sharing um what they had seen or they wanted like to know about the bottles. There was a question on origins. It's like someone person, oh, how did this get here? And then April's like, oh, well, these questions we cannot, like, we won't address it here, but later if you ask that, send us an email and we'll send you the information. So also that kind of like not having the expert made people value what they were bringing to the table, but also knowing that that could represent another step, and that anytime now that they knew someone inside the museum like April and we have the contact of the curator, then that could become a longer term communications that they could always reach out to them. And I think that April was really efficient into putting that message out there, and we were like encouraging that as well.
There was also like an openness to adding any observation we had about the objects that we actually wanted to add to the notes, let's say, like for their internal purposes. There was an openness to that as well. Like, should someone have insight that about a specific object, they're also open to receiving that and noting it, like during this visit, this was mentioned by this person, kind of to continue the information gathering about the object.
Yes, and also I think it was mentioned there too, like a moment where we were talking and we were around the bottles, but then April mentioned, I can show you more. And then she opened to like cupboards, like and then people, you could see in their faces, we had seen this very organized selection on the table, but suddenly you open this cupboard where everything is just like stuck there basically, and and you could see people's faces like, oh wow. I think that was the moment when people realized there is so much stuff, and then people started to get closer to the items. They wanted to know, what was that, because there were fragments, there were things from different cultures. And I think that just like having that visual but very physical experience really make them aware of something that they weren't familiar with. Like, they know museums have stuff, but then later we had this conversation about, like, there is so much of it's our culture. Suddenly a sense of responsibility later was mentioned, so that was an interesting moment to witness, because Camila and I had experimented that before when we entered collections, and suddenly it's like, oh wow, oh, we
Like, you
didn't know
have all
it.
this? Like,
Uh-huh.
wow. Yeah.
So I guess we have mentioned a little bit about. So those are some of the drawers, the cabinets that people were looking into, and they got like very. And that moment actually, because you have to, wait for someone to get closer to the spot, and that made the group break into smaller groups. And it was very interesting because other conversations emerged from that. Like, for example, the conversation about the repatriation emerged in a smaller group, as well as like, oh, can you ask for this back, and who gets it back? And people were asking like very like honest questions, like with very genuine curiosity about, like, oh, and how are the procedures? And it's like, oh, if I knew a community, can I then help them get their stuff back? And and April was explaining, like, each case has a specific procedure, but that there were these possibilities out there. So people knowing about these things, for us, was very important. We realized, like, most people may not be aware, and you never know when you can become the link to something else. So then also there was a question of, like, how do we had selected a piece that was identified as like probably not original piece. So also people ask, like, oh, how do you know? And then realizing that the museum was like, well, actually we don't really know. It's just like someone came and looked at it and just make the comment that this is not a real one. But they didn't do any further research. They just had to register basically that comment, and that it's what changed the status of that specific item into maybe it's not our original. So those little details of, like, how it functions, how information it is registered, and how how actually people that goes into these spaces do have a lot of agency into how these objects are taken care of or classified, was something that it was great for us to to share with a different crowd that we are usually used to work with.
Yeah, something else I'm remembering looking at this photo is actually how strong the smell is from just ceramics being in a closet essentially that's not opened very frequently. So it was also a very visceral experience that I just thought I would mention because that does not come across in the photo, but yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The space,
Yeah.
everything, the lighting, there is something very particular about the whole experience of being in the vaults of the museum.
We also had, as I mentioned before, one Latin American artist in the visit, Michelle Peraza, and we asked if she could take some notes and also do some drawings. She's a high realism painter, and we thought it would be nice as well to have that added element and added observational perspective too. So here are some of her drawings that you can see here.
So
after the
after
visit. Yeah. Do you
we
want
went
to go?
to, well, if you want to, you can share. But we went back to the room and had our snacks, and that also became another moment where people continued the smaller conversations they had in the storage room. They were taken into the snack room, and people continued to share more about their stories. Like it's just nice to see that exchange and how the museum can provide that for a diasporic community, sharing histories of immigration. One of the members started talking also about like the activism his dad had done in Peru. We had also the opportunity to share a little bit with April, like the political situation currently in Peru. Also, kind of like linking it to like, these items come from and from all of these, but you have these very complex histories happening right now as well. Then it was just like this, like it was this very organic way of talking to people in smaller groups, but then you join the wider conversation. So it was very interesting. In this case, I find it so funny that one of the people that had joined actually lived in a nearby area as I did in Lima. So, and also we had family from the north of Peru, specific places. So it was like, oh, you also have family from there, and we've been living like and it's funny we're finding ourselves now here in this experience. So just having those connections, I guess for us, we realize how important was for people to get those points. And after we had our little break, people got like the refreshments, the snacks. Then we went to the exhibition because this was a proposal from April, and we thought it was a great idea for them to see how things are storage, the selection. But then what happens with this? What is really shown to the public? And then we arrived to the vitrine. You want to talk more about it, Cami?
Yeah, it was interesting, I guess, as well to observe as a group, like which objects are actually curated into the selection. And we felt after having seen objects in the vault that the experience of seeing it in the museum was not as interesting or like it was much more enriching to have the experience of having such a close and personal connection to the objects, seeing them up close. And I think in the group, it really created more of a sense of trust in the museum. And as Karina mentioned before, too, a personal responsibility to the objects. Like folks really felt called to come back. And that was actually something that April shared with us multiple times throughout the visit is this is actually just the beginning. This is our first connection, but really created a feeling of openness that any of us can come back at any point and revisit these objects, revisit these ancestors, and um, also as a group, I think we kind of felt that it was a bit of now that we have this connection, our personal responsibility to make sure that they're um, well taken care of as well.
So for us, April had to leave at that point. She shared a bit about the vitrine. People were curious about how items were selected from that vast collection. How do you just select these few ones? And then she was like, well, Justin is is the person that has information. You can contact him and ask him about this stuff. But and then she was like, I know it is not. And I like that attitude of the museum. Someone representing the museum saying, I know the lighting and that this room is not ideal. What we have here is not ideal. But it is what we have now. And this is what we try to do is like to take a bit of representation of each of the cultures in a very linear way. The lighting is not great because there are textiles that we have to take care of there in that vitrine. And yes, it's mixed like with other stuff from around the world. So she pointed out those things, and I guess that people were also, yes, that experience of having the objects and then seeing just very specific items in such a specific display that wasn't as inviting. Actually, we've been seeing these other objects, looking at them, even if it was a little bit more messy in the storage. I guess people were able to grasp more. And Then after some time talking about what we were seeing there, then April had to leave, and that I think allowed us for us to wrap up, to have like a moment of wrapping up and having people share their thoughts about the experience. And it was quite nice because we just wanted to know what people were taking from the visit, what were like their interests after this. And many of them, it felt very sincere, like gratefulness for having been there, being able to see this other side of the museum, but also this sense of like pride and connection they could feel with the items in a way that they hadn't before. And also, yes, one participant mentioned this sense of like this responsibility that for us is like we want you all to take that with you, like in one way or another in your capacity. Now you are also responsible of these items, these ancestors. Like for some reason, just like each person that was in the group, we have coincide in time and space in these lands. Um, so kind of like getting that sense of, I guess, kinship between the group, but also kinship with we don't like to call them objects, but with the selected ceramics in this case, and the ceramics we were having in front of us. So I guess that for us, that is like what we took, like, people were really feeling this kinship. And a couple of people had to leave earlier, but then we noticed that they were very appreciative of the experience. So we it was nice just like to end this sort of like tour experience, and suddenly it's like we are hugging each other, right? So that was a nice way to end it. I guess people were free to actually look at more things in the museum if they wanted, because they had gotten their bracelets of access. But the funny and interesting thing to me, it is like, oh, it's pricey. Like a ticket to the room is pricey. So I would guess like more people would I want to check out the stuff. But most of them were like, no, we've seen enough. Like we've seen enough. We need like to get out of this place. But it was just nice to wrap it up like with a hack. And now our questions like with Cami is more like, how are we gonna keep this relationship with them? Which other breaks are we gonna do? And try to keep that interest of a group that already are kind of like familiar with each other, and continue to work up on that, because I guess the commitment to continue the conversation to a specific people, I think is that what makes these things more meaningful, not just like a one-time thing. But we're thinking about other projects where we would probably like to include them, and make them feel that that they continue to learn, that we this is not just a one-time thing. Like even if we ask questions, because we do have lots of questions about for our research about the bottles, we will include them in any information we learn, and we'll try to keep this group in mind, because I think they were very generous in what they shared as well. So I think they really help us do what we wanted, which was having a nice visit to these ceramics. So
And right after the visit, we also had folks reach out and hear some of their reactions after the visit. People were really grateful, as Karina mentioned, and really shared kind of wanting to continue this relationship. And yeah, now
that's
we
it.
can open it up to any questions. Here's our email if anybody also wants to continue the conversation beyond this session. But yeah.
Hi, may you go back to the previous slide for a second?
This one?
Yeah, I just wanted to look at what the responses were from the participants
Mhm.
again. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so for us, this was mostly like to share. If you have any questions, just to encourage you to do this type of work, basically with your own community. So I think there was a question there.
Oh yeah. Hi, this is Alexis. Nice to hear from you, Karina. Congrats. And I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate how you provided. Did you provide the snacks as well as the transportation? I think food and transportation, to make it as easy as possible to break down any barriers to access really matters. So this is a wonderful project. I can't wait to talk about it with some folks at the History Museum. Thank
Oh,
you.
man. Well, thank you, thank you. Yes, and it's core. We talk with Kara, but also we kind of are aware of the things ourselves that you need break, you need to eat, you need to. Your body is important. Your body is in the space, and we want your body in the space, so we have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
facilitate it.
Okay, I see two raised hands. I don't know who was first, but
That's fair.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Karina, Camila. It was really interesting. I was late, so I didn't join the beginning. So I'm sorry if I'm, asking for something that was already told. But I'm just, very simply curious, like, what do you plan to do next with that experience that you gained from this project?
Well, we actually disemerged from a project we had in hand. Like first, I mentioned that I had done this research trip, and that is like the initial kind of connection with these specific types of bottles and ceramics. Um, and we had this whole idea of like making a big project where we do want to bring an artist from Peru to make replicas and bring the songs back to Peru. So we didn't get the grant because we had applied for doing that, but we think that this was a very nice initial step for us to get that communication with the museum, to visit the bottles, have that first contact with the bottles, but also it was nice to have the community because now we are not gonna give up. We're gonna try to put our project because we really want to these bottles to sound again. Um, we'll do it with, of course, gaining more trust from the museum and doing the respective protocols to keep the bottle safe as well. But we want to have replicas. We want our artist, selected artist, which is Dimitri Manga, who introduced us to these artifacts, to come observe the bottles, make replicas, but now we want to integrate the group into this. We would love them to hear the sounds. We would love them to be part of this research project as well. So that is how we want. I think like we're considering one of the ways to move forward. And well, Cami and I are always exploring other museum collections. So we think maybe we can repeat this in other museums where they have these specific bottles as well. So it's just a matter like of logistics, times, and emotional work. But that is one of the many possibilities we are. The experience also feels so recent, so we are trying to still even process it ourselves. But for us, it was in a way fulfilling, but also quite. We want to keep, give it a distance of time, and how do we keep the communication with the group first as well?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, it sounded very deep and with with need to process that and digest, I guess. So we have a fingers crossed with everything, and I hope you can take this also like take this experience to some other activities, or it could be as I saw already some comments, it could be even replicated or multiplied with some other by someone else or some other projects. So thanks again for this very enriching presentation.
Thank you, Gaxfer.
thank
I think we
you.
have Eva. Eva?
Hi, thank you for sharing this wonderful project. I love the fluidity and the flexibility of the experience, but I also was fascinated about how it was also well structured. So, like in that sense, and based on your experience, what like how would you recommend fast coordinating a project where you're not sure how many people would attend? Would you still think it's better to get people to confirm the event, or would that like limit the participants' numbers?
Hmm. Yeah, I think with this one, it was interesting because I guess part of the protocol from the museum is it can't really be a drop-in session just because they do need like a specific list of names and emails for security purposes, they need to know like exactly who's coming. So that was something that we had to do beforehand. So definitely it was key to have like a confirmed group. The fact that some people didn't show up, we did kind of anticipate, even though everyone RSVP'd. And in the end, we actually thought that the group size was perfect. Any more would have felt like really, really crowded and crammed in this space. Um, so yeah, I think in terms of sort of the museum protocol, it wouldn't have been possible to have it be like even more flexible, kind of drop in. Like it required some commitment from the people attending as well.
Yes, and one thing to keep in mind too, and this is also in terms of like access and how it's, communications with the museum staff can be a back and forth when you're trying even to choose a date. So it was like, oh, this is when we are available. We give you this frame of time. And then the museum, yes, let's confirm. Oh, no, can we move this now to this date? Because this is when we have an open slot. So then our options were limited too. So then for us to select, we would have been ideal on a weekend, right? Because more people can do it on a weekend, but they didn't have that option for us. So we had to go with what was available and doable for us. And as Cami mentioned, there are like, we asked like how, our logic was this, how many people can we invite? And the museum said, well, 10. Because for security, this is the amount that people that fit. So we were like, okay, we're gonna get those 10. Like we want those 10. We're gonna get as much. We know that maybe some people won't show up, but our goal was like we don't go less than that. The more people we can get into the space, we're going for that. And that's what we try to do with our calls. I always find it that circulation and calls can be hard, like especially to reach that type of audience and having the variety of audiences that we wanted to was it's you just have to let people show their interest, and we reach out to many of these the list of organizations. Some of them did not reach back, and some of them, I think, actually, some of the people were aware of the call because of them. Um, but it is true, like it is the thing about like bringing someone in without anticipation, because then we had to do the forms and all this paperwork. And at some point, even one of the attendants that came to with his kid, he brought another kid, not the kid that was supposed to come. And that was also a little bit of a hassle. At the moment of checking in, it was like, oh, but this is not, this is not blah blah blah. This is blah blah, and it's like, oh yeah, but it is like we have the number, and it was also some kind of clarification that had to be done at the time for the kid to be able to get in. So those are, let's say, like the security matters that have to be kept into account. The time also, we were very keen into asking several times to our participants if they were still able to make it. So just like to let us know. And one thing is we clarified, please let us know if you are not gonna come because in advance, because we have people in the waiting list. Um, but yes, sometimes weather happens, these things happens that make it less, but I would say aim for the maximum people that you can put in the space.
Thank you. That's a wonderful advice. Thank you so much.
Alex, thank you, Heva, for your question.
Yeah, I have a question as well. And sorry if you did say this because I've been behind the scenes, like letting people in to the Zoom and things, so I haven't always been listening to absolutely everything. But I'm curious, I believe you said that like you were able to get really close to the objects and that they were very open. Were you able to actually use any of the whistling bottles and to get to hear the sounds of them? And then if not, do you think there'd be opportunity for that in the future as you like build a relationship with the folks in the collections? Yeah, just curious to know.
Well,
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Grace.
This time, we did not touch them, and it didn't kind of naturally come up. We were able to get like really, really close, like literally phone this close to the object. But nobody sort of asked, I think, if that was something we wanted. April did mention that would have been possible. But in terms of playing, we're still unsure kind of where they stand on actually like using the instruments.
So for us, we kind of dropped the idea there with April. We said like, "Oh, it would be great if we come back," and and we mentioned, oh, there are these artists that have been doing research and all of these initiatives that had happened in other museums. So we kind of put it there because we felt this is our moment to kind of build a relationship with, to not push beyond, but kind of like have these conversations. But I was surprised because we've been in other kind of like handlings where, you had everybody has to wear, the mittens, and you basically it's like don't breathe next to the object. This was very open, I guess. The objects were there. April was looking at something else, and then people were, like they were even pointing very close, like, oh, look at that. There was a mention, I think, of someone. Yes, sometimes you can see the fingerprints of the maker, and, like these amazing observations. So it was, we were surprised that that happened. So we felt that in that sense, there was no need, like, oh, can we touch it and do that? Because also the time was so short. We realized that 3 hours seemed like a lot, but it wasn't really. Um, so we just kind of like let us, I guess for Camila and I was also, we were surprised of how we were able to kind of let also the rhythm and the interest of the group guide experience. But definitely, like our intention is to get those songs out eventually and really have a tryout, and that is why we're considering now. Maybe it would be nice to gather the group again and for them to listen if that is a possibility. But we do want to we want to make the victory here, and we want to bring the songs back home.
Yeah. Thanks so much
Amy?
for that.
Hi. You mentioned quickly about possibly having a Peruvian artist come and make like replicas. Would that be I guess like your form of repatriation efforts to kind of like bring this like those types of objects back home, or would you prefer eventually to actually have the originals also repatriated and held in Peru?
We are thinking more about that kind of like symbolic one, because also we have to consider where would these items go. We know a place where we want to do a collaboration with. There is a small museum in Cusco, that is a community museum. And it is a place where you can touch the items. The person, the director there knows the history of each of them, how they arrived into the space. So it has a totally different logic. And it's a very fascinating museum. It's called ALCA. It's ALQA. And we've been in conversations with them because if we are able to eventually bring Dimitri, do the replicas, we want some of the replicas to go there. And also we want Dimitri to make sounds and more like bring it into his own contemporary musician practice. So we would like to do like sort of like event where the sounds can be heard, especially in Peru. So yes, we're so far thinking about this more like symbolic representation, but we believe that once you hear the real sounds of this, because each bottle counts. There has been projects, there is a specialist musicologist, archaeologist that has worked in Ecuador with a lot of Ecuadorian bottles. He's Peruvian Argentinian, but he's worked a lot with, and now he's writing a book actually on Colombian wisdom bottles as well. So he's done this wide research because he has been allowed to play the bottles in a museum in Ecuador that has a wide collection. So these bottles are in different museum collections in Peru, in Ecuador, in Colombia. They are there. It depends on the quantity. Maybe we don't have as much, but there are collections that have this. The thing is that each bottle counts. each item, each ancestor in a way counts because it gives us more information to understand those past and those histories. So the song that each of them, is like activating them. It's like they deserve to be used in the way they were meant to. We don't know exactly how. There is a lot of theories about, more ritualistic. So this is the thing too when you're talking about very antique items. But being able to bring those sounds, replicate them back home are very important because why we are fascinated about these bottles is because they really, in them, they embody the first of all, like in Andean there's different Andean cosmology. It's not like one block. Okay, there's many cultures, just to clarify that. But one thing that there's in common in many of the Andean communities still today, it is that, certain items that are for ritual or that carry a lot. In this case, the bottles, they put together four elements. You have earth, which is the clay. You have to fire them, right? Then you have that's a fire. So then you have also you have the wind because to make them sound, it's like the wind and the water interacting. So it's like this very complex technology, hydraulic technology that allows for sound. Now, the difference between other items where you need to play them because you need to input your air or your hand, and here you also have to shake them. But then you put the water and it is the sound that the ancestors heard. So you're going to get the same sounds that were heard thousands of years ago. And for us, bringing those sounds back, not necessarily like the bottles, it would be ideal maybe if the museum would we want to do that. But we also have to find somewhere that in Peru where they would like to have these and activate it in different ways because sometimes replicating things and if you bring it to another museum, I don't know, in Lima, it is like you're just like repeating the same thing, right? Of access of so it would be in a place like for us Araha, that small museum represents that possibility. And for us also, this is important to mention, I think, for us in Cali, is that we are able to put these dots together because we really want to break the bridges between the so-called North and South America. And for us, having these things in more organic ways, collaborating, bringing someone from the South to the north to be able to access these spaces is very important for us because it's easier for people from the north, like Camila and I, that now we have access, we have Canadian passports, we can move along. But for our people, it's not the same. So people that are interested, that are working on the ground, that are reviving traditions, that are keeping traditions alive, being able to bring them and to have access to these collections for us is very important. Even if they cannot take the item, but they can take the sounds, they can take the techniques, they can reproduce that. For us, it is what we can offer in our possibilities as we learn in the way too of how we move in these spaces too. Are there any other questions? I don't know, Cami, you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think like it really is like an issue of proximity because I think like what the Ram also mentioned is a lot of the repatriation that they do is within North America, because there is a closer connection to the communities and like the knowing where these things come from. But as Kadi mentioned, a lot of these objects are so ancient and because of the colonial violence in Latin America, there's been often like a distancing from kind of knowing exactly like who does this belong to today. So it's a bit of a more complex question within that context. But yeah, as Karina said, our dream is to bring the sounds back and to bring artists from the South to Canada.
Well, thank you so much to you both. If there's no more questions, I'm guessing we can wrap up. This is the last call if anyone wants to throw their hands up. But I just want to say a big thank you from Thinking Through the Museum for your both being here today and just having this wonderful discussion with us all. It's really inspiring to hear, and I'm sure it's going to also inspire a lot of other folks doing work in their own respective institutions and in their own personal projects. So yeah, thank you both.
And feel free to reach out to us for any advice. We are here to help.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.